Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 3. Glad to have you all here with us this morning. Okay, let's be honest. Have you ever looked out at your class and thought, wow, I am speaking fluent Spanish or French or German or Mandarin to a room full of mashed potatoes? Today's episode is called They're Not Listening, or Are They? Because if you teach with comprehensible input long enough, you eventually learn that blank stares don't actually mean blank brains. I'm hanging out with Darcy Chase and Pamela Sparks, and together we're unpacking the sneaky signs of real comprehension, the lies our teacher brains tell us mid-lesson, and how to tell the difference between they're lost and they're processing like champs. Darcy brings 20 plus years of classroom experience, a deep CI lens shaped by conferences, institutes, and mentorship, and the perspective of teaching high school French in rural Maine, after working with learners from preschool to adults. And Pamela comes in hot with a background as a professional translator on over 150 film and TV projects, now channeling that real-world language expertise into teaching Spanish and French and Japanese at the high school level. So if you've ever slowed down, repeated yourself, or re-explained something that absolutely did not need re-explaining because the vibes fell off, yeah, this one's for you. Spoiler alert, sometimes the best move is to stop panicking and just keep talking. And we'll be right back after these short messages. And if my buttons will work. Ever feel like you're clinging to the edge of your teacher planner, just hoping today's lesson magically appears? Enter the CI Survival Kit, a monthly membership made for teachers who love comprehensible input, but also love not reinventing the wheel every Sunday night. Each month you get fresh, ready-to-use lessons, time-saving tools, and just enough structure to keep your teaching life together. No stress, no guilt, just monthly help from someone who gets it. Sign up at imm.us/survival and let the survival kit do the heavy lifting for once.
Welcome to Comprehend This, real talk for real language teachers. No drills, no dry theory, just honest stories, practical ideas, and a reminder you're not alone in the CI trenches. Let's dive in.
And we're live. Welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Hello. Thank you so much for having us here today. Very
You're
excited
so
to
welcome.
be here.
Glad to have you both. Darcy, let's start with you for a second. Is there anything you'd like to know us to know about you that I didn't mention in the intro?
I think just one thing that I've learned over the years is that you don't have to be a native speaker in order to be an effective teacher. And that's something I didn't really know as a young woman just choosing my career. I didn't start out as a French teacher because when I was really young, I thought, well, I'm not a native speaker. How could I possibly be a good teacher of French? And I've learned over the years that native speakers are not necessarily good teachers. Often they're not very good. So I sort of came at teaching French a little bit sideways. I started as a regular ed teacher and then moved into ESL and then finally came back to my first love, which was French. So I've been a teacher for over 20 years, but just teaching French, I think I'm about 7 years in, and probably 6 of those I've been focusing on CI.
Awesome.
Darcy, what did you teach before EL? You were a gen ed teacher. What were you teaching first?
I taught English. I taught language arts, social studies, math. Even though my major in college was linguistics, I had a little side gig there for a while. And then I came back to language teaching, that was what I really wanted to do.
Awesome. You brought up a couple points I'll talk about in a minute because you talk about native speakers and I have my little perspective on that as well. What about you, Pamela?
Well, I'm going to dive right into the native speaker thing because that I think is such a common misconception. I work with a few international professional learning communities like the Duolingo Educators Network and a couple others like that. And I'm always coaching people who kind of fall into the job because, oh, I'm a native speaker and so I got hired and I don't know how to teach. There is a lot of puzzle solving that goes on with teaching. You have to know, how am I going to present this information? How am I going to present it in a different way? This student's missing something. What am I going to do for this student? This student's ready to move on. What am I going to do for this student? There's so many moving pieces that fit together. And you think about like the students who come to you, a lot of them always come to us and they have never thought about speaking English. If they're a native English speaker in our class, they haven't thought about speaking English since they were 2 years old, and they said, I got 2 feet, and everybody laughed at them. And now they don't think about it anymore. And so if you're someone who hasn't thought about the language acquisition process, how are you going to convey that to 35 little faces in front of you? So I am 100,000,000% on board with you. Just because you're a native speaker does not mean you have the qualifications.
Right.
And-
Even something as simple as going slow and repeating things,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll kind of add on to that here's my thing with native speakers. I never liked, no offense to native speakers, but I never liked having a native speaker as a teacher. And it wasn't because of their skills. Obviously, they had much better skills than I could ever hope to have. But the problem was, I'm a why kid. And I would always ask, why? Why does it do this? Why? And the answer would be the same that they would give me was the same answer that I would give an English speaker. That's just the way it is. I don't know why it does it. Why does go to went? Who the hell knows? It's just, I can't explain it. But as a learned person, we learn these things. We learn why the things happen. And so when a kid asks me, why does this do that? I can explain. Like what's coming up in my classrooms now is the change the Z to a C before, when you're making a plural. Well, I tell them it's a spelling rule. It has nothing to do with plurals because the textbook always teaches it in pieces. It says, here it is in how it does it in verbs when the verbs come up. Here's how it comes when it does it with, plurals. But it's a spelling rule in Spanish. You cannot have a Z before an I or an E. It must change to C. Always, always, always. And in Spanish, there are spelling rules. There are no exceptions. Once you have a spelling rule, it's a spelling rule. So any word where a Z would come before an I or an E, like, why do we spell zebra with a C in Spanish? Because you can't have a Z before an E or an I. It must be a C. So I could explain that where a native speaker would say to me, I don't know, that's just the way it is. Like, I can't explain why our Y goes to an IE before S when we pluralize in English. But so that's my one beef. My second one is, like you said, they don't know how to teach it. I remember when I first started teaching, my neighbor was a Chilean. She was from Chile and she was going, the book says I have to teach an AR and an ER and an IR verb. I don't know what those are, and I'm a native speaker. I'm like, well, have you noticed that like 75% of all verbs end in AR and another like 15 to 20% are in ER and then the last 5 to 10% are IR? Well, I never thought of that, but I guess. And so we have these constructs that we do as a non-native speaker to make it easier to comprehend or sometimes complicate things that shouldn't be complicated. And we can work with those kinds of things where native speakers haven't had to deal with that. So I think they have an advantage in the language fluency part, but in the explaining the grammar and the whys and the where-tos of things, they lack behind us. So we complement each other really well. But I think that, because I know when I started speaking Spanish, my major was German. And so my Spanish was not as fluent as it is now speaking. I could read it, I could write it, no problem. But using it orally, but teaching with CI, made my oral proficiency skyrocket from doing it for 25 years. You get that proficiency that you didn't have before. So I agree with everything you both have said about that. But it's a key idea because a lot of people think that I can't do this because my language ability isn't this high. It might only be, intermediate low, or sometimes in the middle school sectors, they say, oh, you've got a minor in French. We need you to teach our French program. And you're like, what? And then, you might only be at the novice high level, but you can still do it and you can develop your skills. So I think, as you said, there's the accidentalness of it, and the worryingness of not being a native speaker should not be a hindrance to it.
I do want to say, first of all, hashtag not all native speakers, because there are plenty of really good native speaker teachers. Right? I've taught English, and so I can pick English apart, But you bring up a really good point here, because I don't know if you guys remember taking the ACTFL test to get your certification. That is a really high bar. And I am coaching a lot of people. I remember my class of cohorts. Half of them did not pass the test. And in a world where we're short on teachers and we're short on good teachers, that ACTFL test is often a career killer, I have seen, because they're looking for native speaker fluency, not can you explain the concept? Can you slow down, like Darcy was saying? Can you say it a different way? Can you circumlocute? Can you teach the students to circumlocute and communicate? They're not looking for that. They're looking for, I remember when I took it in Japanese, I memorized all the, I was like, this is going to be hard. So I memorized a bunch of terminology for the theory of relativity. I can't explain the theory of relativity in English, but they thought that I could in Japanese. So that's the only way I got through it in my 20s, But I think this is a real problem, that the world doesn't recognize the skills involved in teaching.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Teaching is an art. And it doesn't matter if we're teaching language, if we're teaching math, if we're teaching history. There is classroom management that you have to learn. There is a bunch of logistical stuff. How are you going to arrange your classroom? Now, there's so much involved in the art of teaching.
And this is so evident. Go ahead, Darcy.
I was just going to say, I had a professor in my education program once said, remember, you don't actually teach the content area, you teach students. Always remember that. And so I do have to remind myself, like, okay, I'm all about this French stuff, but I need to look at this kid in front of me and change what I'm doing based on what they need.
That is such a true statement. And you brought up the college. So I was going to say, not having teaching skills is so apparent in college because they don't require them to learn how to teach or go through education. So there are some, like you said, there are some excellent college professors out there, but there are some who just know how to talk, and that's all they know how to do. And
absolutely.
And they're professors. And I love this. We don't teach content, we teach students. It is so true. And I'll give you an example from a math teacher's perspective. I'm not a math teacher. I'm allergic to math. Desperately allergic to math. But he was like, I'm supposed to start here for 9th grade algebra. This is where I'm supposed to start. But I have kids from like 6 different feeder schools coming in, and they're all at different skills. If I started here where my page 1 is, where I'm supposed to start, I'm going to lose half my kids in the first month, and they're never going to catch back up. So he goes, I've got to start where they are. I've got to teach the kids in front of me. And that's why I'm not a fan of pacing guides. And, where teachers go at the copy room, what page are you on? What chapter are you on in the book? Because that's not important. It's not important that I'm on chapter 6 if I've left half my class behind. They're still in chapter 2, and they don't know anything beyond that at this point. So we got to teach the kids in front of us. And I think that's so important. Yes, we have a curriculum, but it doesn't matter if we cover the curriculum if none of our kids acquire it or learn it. So we have to teach the kids in front of us. And that's why I'm always on the advocate of less is more. I base my curriculum off verbs. Yes, do I need nouns and adjectives and adverbs and prepositions to be able to do that? Absolutely. But I say if I focus on the verbs, I get all the rest of that for free. It has to come in because I can't teach without a subject and a verb. You got to have, so it all comes in for free. If I target on verbs, then everything else comes in instead of piling my curriculum with 100 useless nouns like pushpin and paperclip that the kids aren't really going to have a need for.
Right. And it's
Estoy de
like,
acuerdo.
and it's
Totally
like,
agree.
the idea of, how they used to tell you, try to be 90% in the target language or 100% in the target language. You're doing, you're a very virtuous language teacher if you're doing that. But what if the kids have no idea what you're saying? You are in the target language. They're somewhere else. So it's all about the kids, what the kids need in the moment.
And that brings us to our topic today. How do we know that they are actually understanding and paying attention? Because I always introduce my classes. I'm like, you guys, it's so important that you let me know when I'm going too fast, especially because right now, Me Fighter 1304 just says hi. Hello, Me Fighter 1304. The way we teach now, I teach on a semester system. So we teach a whole school year in a semester, and I get new kids every semester. So it's not really good for language teaching. I don't recommend it. But because of that, when I come back after winter break, my brain is still at the end of last semester. So I'm at that speed of where my kids ended up after 20 weeks of language. So slowing back down, it's easier in August when I haven't spoken the language with students in 2 months. But right after the semester, after 2 weeks, I'm still in that brain. So I tell them, you have to let me know. And I have my kids stomp on the floor. Because if my back is turned to that section of kids and they've got their hand up, I don't see that. Or if they've got the timeout symbol, I don't see that. So I like them to stomp. But I'm like, it's so important that you have to stomp and let me know that I'm going too fast or too slow. Because if I'm looking at you, this is what you look like when you understand. And this is what you look like when you don't understand. And for those of you listening on the podcast, my face did not change from one to the other. Because that's what they look like. They're just staring ahead. And how do we know if they really understand? I do trick them. I will deliberately say something that I know they won't understand to see if they're stomping or not. And I've even gone into a completely different language before to really know that they really couldn't and see if they really noticed. Because I can speak a little bit of French, I can speak German, I can speak Spanish, and I can speak English. So I'll do that just to kind of test them, especially the beginning to train them that how important that it really is. What are your strategies for that?
Scott, can I ask you really quick, how long are your classes? 2 hours long then? How
hour
are
and
you
a half.
squeezing a year? An hour and a half. Okay.
We have an hour and a half and 5 days a week. So we see them for 5 days a week for an hour and a half.
Okay.
But you really can't. Our level 1 teaches the first half of the level 1 book, and our level 2 teaches the second half. It's not even a half. We only cover 4 chapters in a year, and it's really 3.5. We don't really get to the fourth one of our textbook. So our level 2s don't even touch past tense.
Wow.
So they don't get past tense into level 3. So it's really and it's too much language at once, because although I'm having double the classroom time, I can't teach 2 lessons because it needs to settle and dry. I call it like paint layers. It's got to dry in between. They need an overnight processing before I can add on another aspect of the language. And so it's really not, it's just an extended 1 period is really all that it does.
I keep telling my students, you cannot stay up all night and cram French and wake up fluent in French tomorrow. That's not the way the brain works.
Exactly.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I definitely have I'm starting to rethink my strategy because I do the timeout symbol. I teach that on the very first day of class. It's one of my rules. It's on my
Yeah.
wall. It says you must tell the teacher when she is not being clear, not when you don't understand, because then it kind of makes them have to out themselves like, "Oh, I
That's
don't
true.
understand. I'm not as smart as the kid next to me." Instead, I try to frame it like, you're giving me information
Yeah,
that
that's a
I
great
need to
point.
do something differently because my job is to make sure you understand. The kids have to meet me halfway, of course, but I really try to frame it like, okay, when you do this, that means slow your roll, lady,
Yeah.
like, and then I do the same thing. I'll say something really fast that I know they don't know. And if nobody does the symbol, I go, what? You all understood that? Who's going to translate? And I kind of
Yeah.
joke around with them to train them that they do need to give me this symbol. And it's, they're getting better at it.
Absolutely.
You
But
know,
that's a good point.
Bryce Hedstrom said, "My job is to teach. Your job is to tell me when I'm not doing my job."
Oh, I
That's a
like
good point.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I like both those aspects because it puts the onus on us. Because I always tell them too when it's a quiz, I go, I don't give you a quiz till I'm pretty confident that 80% of you will pass it with an 80% or
Right.
better, not just passing. And if I get it wrong and I see that everybody's screwed up, that's my fault, not your fault. So
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell them that way because I do pop quizzes. I don't ever announce my quizzes because I don't want to know what they studied for because that's going to leave their brains within 24 to 48 hours. I want to know what's actually stuck in their brains. So that's why I do it that way. But I say, I'm not the gotcha teacher. I'm not the teacher goes, I assigned 2 chapters last night to read. You guys didn't read it? Fine. We're having a quiz right now. What's the point of that other than to rub their nose in it? Because the point of a quiz is to let you know what they understood and what they didn't understand. If you already know they didn't do the work, you already know they don't understand. There's no reason to rub their nose in it type of thing. That kind of teacher is a gotcha teacher. That's not me. And so I explain them because they always get fear when I say all quizzes are unannounced. They get that little fear in them because they've only experienced pop quizzes in the form of the gotcha teacher when they know you didn't do the work and now they're trying to get you. So I tell them why I do it. But I like that we're putting the onus back on ourselves in that comprehensible part too. Because I know Dr. Terry Waltz, she always says, it's not a point to be comprehensible because we might be comprehensible, but if we're not comprehended by the students, then how comprehensible doesn't even come into play. Right. So she likes to call it, that you want to be comprehended because you could be talking really simple, but on the first day, really simple might still be too complicated.
Absolutely. You could be using all your strategies, going really slow, but maybe you aren't pointing to any visuals, or maybe you're not using a little bit of English as a bridge, and you're not doing anything to guide them toward understanding.
And visuals are also a very cultural thing. I know we've always had this discussion about the culture, about, you have a picture of a guy eating a hamburger. What is that mean? And different people interpret that differently. Is that the verb eating? Is that the noun hamburger? What is it? Right. And this is the experience I had when I tried Rosetta Stone, that, they don't use any English translation at all. And so I'm watching a Rosetta on Korean. I wanted to learn Korean. So I wanted to take a language I had no background in. So I really was experienced in it. And they were showing me pictures of a guy on a horse and a plane and a car and all of this. And I thought, this is the lesson number 1, by the way. So I thought, oh, great. I now know how to say horse and man and car. And I'm excited. And then I watched the version in Spanish. It wasn't how a horse and car and man. It was the prepositions on top of, next to. Who, number 1, starts with the prepositions, number 1.
Right.
And number 2, out of context, I had no idea. So my brain for that whole lesson thought that's what I was learning. And I learned something completely different because although they were being comprehensible, it was not being comprehended.
I could go on and on about Rosetta Stone and what a horrible company they are. And the pictures, although they're photographically gorgeous, they have nothing to do with anything, and they're not cultural, and they're sexist. And I never would have thought I would notice this, but like to run, they always have men running a race, and for women jogging, like talking in the park while they're jogging. So no, Rosetta Stone is just terrible.
Yeah. I did not find that method to be helpful because you don't necessarily need English translation or native, the common language translation, but you need some kind of context to be able to understand what's going on. And I do speak 100% target language on day one, even in level 1. And I don't orally translate because I don't want to break the illusion of, immersion. But I subtitle myself with I use a Google Doc because it's much better than my handwriting. And I'll just type the words as I go with the English translation. So they'll see the English translations on the board. But I'm not stopping my speaking. I'm speaking slow. I'm taking time to write them. I'm pointing. But I do that in the beginning so I can tell them right away the language of instruction is going to be Spanish in my classroom, but I will make it comprehended by you. And this is one of the ways that I do it. So it makes it really important. Do you guys use any other strategies to help to make not only to make it comprehensible and comprehended, but to know whether or not they actually are? I know Darcy said, like I do, she kind of tricks them and she'll say things really fast to kind of get them to see if they really are, letting her know when she's not speaking, quickly. And speaking slowly enough or speaking comprehensible enough for them. But what are some other strategies that you guys implement?
Well,
go ahead.
As a language teacher, we are constantly formatively assessing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're gonna have a story for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we need to make sure the students understood. Even like during the story, we've got our barometer students that we're watching. We've got all the if we're having them chorally repeat, we're listening for that. We're walking around the room and everything, but then, because we're memory experts, right? We need to get this foreign word into your brain, and we need it into your long-term memory. For me, a lot of my formative assessments are also doing double time, as I'm moving something from your working memory into hopefully your long-term memory. So we'll, like chunk and chew, we'll do a little story or a little activity or something, and then maybe I'll do a Harvard Project Zero thinking routine where I'm like, okay, grab a sheet of paper, write down everything you remember from the story. Okay, now pass it one person to the right. What did they leave off? Okay, pass it one person to the right. Look at any of those words you like and draw a little doodle next to it. Pass it one person to the right. So they're getting more contact with all the vocabulary that we have just used, all the grammatical structures that we have just used. They're getting more contact with it, and they get to use it in a slightly different way. So my hope is it gets deeper into their head. But I've got, at the front of my classroom, I've got a lot of puppets. I've got, my smartboard that I draw on constantly. I've got props next to me. I'm very hammy. Aren't we all? Like, really, we're thespians, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about talking. It's about kind of over enunciating, and you were gesticulating wildly. I didn't gesture until I started learning languages, and now you got the gestures and everything, and I'm walking around the classroom and getting in the face of the kids and everything. So we're constantly formatively assessing and making sure that the students are with us each step of the way. Sometimes that's harder than other times, right? But we've got giant bag of tricks.
Absolutely. What about you, Darcy?
So on my rule display, one of my rules is you must answer all of the teacher's questions. And when I tell them that rule in the beginning of the year, they look terrified because they're like, oh my God, she's going to ask us something in French and we're not going to know how to say the answer in French. And I try to tell them, I'm going to be asking you all kinds of really dumb questions, really obvious questions, like, does so-and-so have one dog or two dogs? Does so-and-so, did so-and-so say they were happy or sad? Really, really obvious questions. And you're going to know the answer to my questions, and I use questions in both French and English. So sometimes I'm asking them a question in French and I'm asking them to show that they understand by like maybe a gesture. If I'm asking how many of something and they don't have the number words yet, they could show me with their fingers. Sometimes I just stop really quick and say, what did I just say? In English. Yep. And then somebody answers and then I know, okay, they're with me. And then I get back into the French of the story or whatever we're doing. So I just use a lot of little questions and I don't mind sticking in, a few seconds of English here and there if it's going to be a bridge to 10 minutes of comprehension. That's my philosophy. If I can ask a quick question in English, get a quick assessment, and then move on and get back into French, I still feel like I'm winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a lot of what you say. And one of my big things is if there's hesitation in the answer, because I tell them like you, they've got to answer all my questions. I go, this is what's telling me. I need to know whether you're understanding, and this is important. So you got to answer every question I ask. Because if not, one of two things happen. You didn't understand or you weren't paying attention. So, right. And I'm going to assume that you didn't understand. I'm going to assume that you're all paying attention because I am the most fascinating thing on this planet right now. So I'm not going to assume that you're not paying attention. So, but I'll ask if I get any hesitation, even a fraction of a second, where I'm like, okay. So I go, what did I just ask? To take the pressure off, because obviously at least one kid didn't understand if I'm not getting a good response back. And so then I can go right there and then somebody will say what I said. And if not, then I go, what? Nobody stomped their feet. How the heck? What? If you didn't understand what I was going on, I'm going to keep going. And if I lost you in minute 10 and we're now in minute 40, you guys have lost 30 minutes of instruction. And that's, I'm not doing my job right. So we go back and do that. Now, you said something about the
stomp and feet thing.
I like that too.
I like it just because, as I said, sometimes my back is turned to one section of the classroom or another, and so I can't see it. I don't want that poor kid sitting there having their hand up, desperate, and I don't see him for 2 or 3 minutes. And I also tell them if one kid stomps their feet, everybody stomps their feet, so no one gets singled out that they're the only one stomping.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that for the effective filter, this is probably really good because your legs are under the table and maybe you think nobody else is going to see you stomping your feet. That I think that's really going to lower the effective filter. The student isn't going to feel singled out. But Darcy, I absolutely love what you're saying about that. Your first rule is you have to answer the teacher. Because again, I think this goes back to what we were saying about just because you're a native speaker just because you can play piano doesn't mean you can teach how to play piano, right? There is an art form to it. And of course there's Doug Lemov, Teach Like a Champion, and he talks an awful lot about no opt-out. And by golly, we are no opt-out. You cannot sit there. We're going to drag you with us learning, We're going to make sure we're going to keep coming back to you. This is what circling is all about, right? We're going to keep circling back to it until you know the answer. And then you're going to feel this real sense of accomplishment because now you know the answer. And that's the whole point of learning, right? Is to get you to that position where you know the answer. So yeah, I really love that, Darcy.
Absolutely. And I was going to touch on when you said about the English translations that you use. And this is something that I was not part of this conversation. I got to preface. This happened at a national TPRS conference. And if you've never been, One of the key cornerstones that they do is one evening during the week, they have immersion dinners. So all the French speakers go to one place, and the rule is only French. German teachers, French, Spanish teachers, just like, or if you're learning the language and you want to practice it, you go with that group. So I always went with the German ones because I don't get as much practice speaking my German anymore since I don't teach German. But my friend and colleague went to the Spanish one. Blaine was there and Dr. Krashen was there. And Blaine and Dr. Krashen agree on 99.9% of everything, except for one thing, where Krashen was absolutely not. There should never be English used in the classroom. No English translation. No, do not do it. Do not ever. Well, of course not. He was of the natural approach. He was one of the co-founders of the natural approach. And they don't use translations for that. But again, that's like Rosetta Stone. I don't know when someone goes like this, what that is. Is that hair? Is that long? I don't know what that gesture is supposed to mean. And if there's not a correlation between the gesture and what that means, and everybody agrees that that gesture now means that, there's a problem. So here they are. They're speaking in Spanish the entire the dinner. And 45 minutes in, everybody's speaking Spanish, no problem. But then I don't even know what context it came in, but the word spark came in, chispa in Spanish. And Dr. Krashen was lost. He didn't know what a chispa was. So they tried circumlocuting it. They tried describing it. They tried doing everything they could and drew pictures on napkins even, trying to get him to understand what this was. And he kept thinking fireworks. He just couldn't, everything that he couldn't do. And one teacher finally said, a native Spanish teacher says, chispa. It means spark. Can we possibly please move on? Because he spent like 15, 20 minutes, trying to make this clear.
It's not efficient.
It's right. Yeah. Let's extrapolate now to a kid in a class. Like you got your top kid and your slower processing kid, and the top kid is frustrated because we've been on this stupid word for like 20 minutes and they don't know. Can we just please move on? And so then the ding went in Krashen's head. Sometimes English translation is the quickest, fastest way to comprehension with no confusion whatsoever. And I love the idea of, and I forgot what the term is, but when they tell a story and they use pictures, they draw on the board. I forgot what they call that.
Sketch note or smash doodle. Yeah,
not that one. It's instead of doing comprehension checks and all of that and all the circling, they just tell like a fairy tale in the target language. Story listening. That's it. Story listening.
Yeah.
My brain loses it.
Yes. So, and you're using visuals to help.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's my thing with that one too. If you don't understand what the picture is saying, then how do you know that they're understanding in there? So that was always my quirk with story listening, and it's the same quirk I have with total immersion, where in schools like where they have dual immersion schools, where they're not allowed to use translation to make it clear the concept, and then they come into regular classes in high school, let's say, and they don't have as much fluency as you think they would because they've always lived in this gray area. I think I know what they're talking about, but I don't have any confirmation. And so I think that sometimes English translation or let's use the word common language translation, because the English might not be the common language. That sometimes is the quickest, easiest, dirtiest way to get them to understand, get everybody clear on the same page without confusion. And as I said, I prefer to do it written on the board in some way. Number one, it's lasting. They can go back and refer to it, and I'm not breaking that illusion of immersion that we have in the classroom.
And I think go ahead. I was just going to say, every decision we make as teachers, like, we just need to remember the most important question is, what am I doing to make sure that they understand, right? So like every single thing I decide to do is about that. It can't just be because I like the sound of my voice or what. Like, it has to be, when I do choose to use English, I'm doing it because I want a very quick way to make sure they understand a particular word or phrase. And then I just move on.
Absolutely. What were you going to say, Pamela?
And oh no, well, I don't even remember what I was going to say, but that's precisely why we can't work out of a textbook, is because every decision we make is so that the students understand. And a textbook doesn't have a student in front of it. A textbook is just
Right.
do this, do this, do this. Right. So I don't even remember what the other thing I was going to say. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say that whenever I'm introducing a new game, I'm very game based. Whenever I'm introducing a new game, the first time I give the instructions in English, because my very, very first year teaching, this was a Japanese 4 class. They should have known. But we're playing a game, and I suddenly noticed that one of my students is in the corner trying not to show that she's crying because she didn't understand the instructions. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just raised her affective filter accidentally. And so I'm always like balancing that now. When am I going to use English so that the students understand what it is that they're supposed to do and understand like the key things going on? And is it worth it to stress out my students and now they're shut down and they won't learn, versus the quick and dirty, okay, I'm just going to say this in English right now. Yeah, so you're absolutely right.
And my rule always is, and for 2 different reasons, discipline and instructions always need to be in English. I don't do the target language for that, for 2 reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One, I don't want the parents to come back, well, my kid didn't understand what you were saying, so now you failed him because he didn't follow the directions, or you punished him because you told him to be quiet, but he didn't understand that even though you know 100% that they did, they're just using it as an excuse. So
yeah.
I have my instructions are always in English, and my discipline is always in English. And here's a good example. For native English speakers in an upper level Spanish class, I put the instructions in English, and here's the problem. They didn't understand them. I said, I need you to write this essay double-spaced. And these kids were 10th graders and had no idea what double-spaced means. I didn't know they didn't know that. So this is what they did. They typed in a word, put 2 spaces after it, did another word, 2 spaces after it, another word, 2 spaces after it. Because they didn't understand the instructions. They never heard the word double-spaced before. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And then my supervisor used to be an English teacher. She goes, oh, no. When you give instructions like that, you have to be so explicit. So you write an example essay and you go, this is how you write it. You go up in the upper left-hand corner. This is where your name goes. Spell it correctly, capital letters. Date goes here. This is your title. Notice how it's centered and it's bold-faced. Skip a line. This is your first paragraph. This is where you tell us the general, what you're going to talk about, and give us your 3 points in supporting evidence. And you do, all the instructions are written as an essay, so they know exactly what to do in every paragraph. And it's explicit, and then you don't get the errors. She goes, you assume too much that they understood what double spacing words and inch margins and all that kind of stuff. So I always go back to that even in English, for native English speakers, if you're using language they don't understand, like double spaced, I thought, you've had to write at least an essay in 8th grade and at least one essay in 9th grade. And has your teacher never asked you to double space before? How am I supposed to write the comments in between if there's not double spaced?
I am so glad I wasn't drinking water at that point, because I would have had a spit take.
Oh, that just reminded me. There's a guy on YouTube. He doesn't teach. He teaches English, but he's a really cool teacher. And I forgot his Real Talk with Reynolds, I think is what it's called. I forgot. He changed the name recently, so I forgot. But he's been out for years. He's written a book. Teach Your Class Off is his book he's got out there. But he just did something with kids. They're all sitting in a circle around in the desk, and the goal was you have to say something so strange and so out of place. You're trying to get the kids to spit water out of their mouths. So everybody had water in their mouths, and then It was in English, and they had to say something that just was so off the cuff to try to get them to spit the water out. And it was kind of a fun activity. I thought, can you imagine doing that in language? Have them come up with funny sentences, or even just some of the sentences they say with their mistakes that I love. I cherish when they make mistakes because then they turn into stories. But that could just make us laugh. That out there, because I know one kid had told me, he said, yeah, are you afraid of big hairy spiders or small hairy spiders? He said small because he thought he was saying big, but he really said small. And so we were all kind of like, really? You're afraid of the small ones, but not the big ones? And it was just kind of a funny little thing that comes out of it. But I thought when you said drinking the water, they just reminded me of that little activity that he did that was kind of fun. So,
wow.
Boy,
are we off topic.
Yeah. Not necessarily, because we're still working with comprehension, because we know if they spit water, they comprehended.
They got the joke. I wanted to say, too, that sometimes evidence of comprehension doesn't happen in that moment. I love it when a few days later, a kid just, a phrase falls out of a kid's mouth that I said, a couple of days ago, and I didn't realize that they had it yet, like, it's like sometimes later you find out like, oh, okay, that did go in, that's in their brain, they own that word or phrase. I didn't realize they owned it yet. I thought we were still working on it, but that kid has it. And it just comes out in some other random situation. So sometimes you don't know immediately.
Or unintentional. I didn't realize how much I used tampoco a lot in my classes, which means either or neither for non-Spanish speakers. And I was asking a question, and one of my kids answered tampoco. And I'm like, where did you learn that word? And they're like, you use it all the time. And I'm like, I didn't even realize I used it. But he picked it up, and, so they're comprehending when they do that. Or I love it when I see, especially a slow processor, because those are the kids I'm really teaching to, because no matter what I do, my middle and top kids will get it somehow. But my slow processors, that's what I'm targeting, because if they get it, the odds are everybody else above them got it. But when all of a sudden I see the light bulb go on, when they go from a very neutral expression to a eyebrows up and like, they got it type of expression, and you can see that they're proud of what they did or what they said or that they understood something. It doesn't matter how small, that's a really good moment for me as well. And it lets me know they do the comprehension.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like to celebrate those. Susie Gross used to say, always do like the 1 minute little party. And you celebrate, you make a big deal, you clap, you make a big deal, you make them a star for just a moment, and you make them feel really good. And that encourages other kids also. They go, I want to feel like that, and I want that little 1 minute party. So then they'll push themselves out there, and I celebrate no matter what. Garbage could be coming out of their mouth, but they're talking. I am so happy about it to let them know that I'm just so proud, because I'd rather have garbage than silence.
Right. And sometimes you accidentally
your foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Darcy.
Oh no, I was just going to say sometimes I've realized that I've accidentally taught them certain phrases, like that wasn't part of my lesson, but because like every day after they do their Quasimodo, which is what I call the bell ringer, because that's Quasimodo's job. So
that's a great. I love that. I absolutely
love it. I just refer. They know what it is. I say, take 5 minutes, do your Quasimodo, and then I always go over to the board and stand in the same place and point to the agenda, and I say, what have we done and what we're going to do. And I always say, comme d'habitude, like usual, we're going to do our calendar, we're going to do this. And then I realized kids started saying like comme d'habitude all the time. And, it wasn't even part of my lesson. It was just something I said when I was explaining the agenda for the day, but they got it, so
yeah,
I love it when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll tell you something else I do to help to kind of, Pamela's talking about we're always formative assessing, and we are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be pencil and paper. It could just be observational. But one of the things that I like to do, and it's so easy to break out and do this at any moment. So if I'm kind of seeing, well, I'm not sure if they're getting where we are in the story, then I'm going to pull out what I call the pencil game. And I learned this from Carmen Andrews, and I don't know if it was her original idea or if she got it from someone else, but the idea is you have a pencil or an object between two students, and then you ask them true and false questions. And then this is the trick part. This is where the higher order thinking comes in. They're only supposed to grab the object if the answer is false. The instinct is to grab it when it's true. But I want to train them to think when it's false. And it works like this. If the answer is true, and you grab the pencil, that's -1 point. If the answer is false and you grab the pencil, it's +1 point. If nobody grabs the pencil, it's neutral. Nobody gets a point one way or the other. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I like this game for 2 reasons. The top kids usually are always pencil grabby, and so they lose a lot of points because they grab it when it's true and they think. And so my slower processors often win, because either they have 0 points because they never grab the pencil because they have no clue, or they have less negative points than the other kids. So it's a confidence builder for them. But I'm watching them play the game, and so I can see who's understanding and who's not. Because you'll see some who hesitant and they're not sure to pull it in there, or they grab it before you finish the question. So I like that one because it's no prep. I don't have to do any prep whatsoever. I'm just like, we're going to play Lápices. Let's go. Get the pencils out. And they put a pencil between 2 pairs. They know how to play the game. And we go, and I can do 2 or 3 questions. And then we can go back into what we were doing and work that way. So it's a great, quick, easy way and fun way for me to check for that comprehension, to make sure they're actually getting it, because in middle school it's much easier to see if they were going to be able to understand or not. Their facial expressions would let me know, because I taught middle school for 11 years. But now I'm in my 12th year of teaching high school, 13th year of teaching high school, something around there. And the high school students are too cool for school, so they don't always show it in their faces. So this is a fun way that I can do it really quickly, really easily, without having to, prepare anything or have anything prepared to assess that. A formal, comprehension question quiz or something like that. So I really like that as a way to be able to tell, keeps the kids on their toes. And it's a fun way. They don't think I'm watching. They don't, and I give out candy for the winners. But it's just a fun way to be able to assess right away. Did they get it or did they not?
And you're not only assessing, but chances are by the end of that little activity, some kid has moved further in their understanding just by virtue of doing this assessment that you've created.
Because they're also hearing me repeat
at the same time.
Their language is being repeated over and over. And I'd like to do this with readings too. Like I have a reading up on the board. So I'll be when I do readings on the board, I have it in a PowerPoint, and I have each paragraph is on a different slide. So they know that when I'm asking questions, this paragraph, the answer is somewhere in that paragraph. They don't have to think about the whole story. They have to just think about the paragraph, and I can slide through the paragraphs and ask questions, which allows me to repeat. The kids are rereading, so they're getting it over again. And it's also reducing the amount of knowledge they have to keep in their head at one time for those slower processors. They know they don't have to think about, well, what happened before this point? What happened after this point? Or are we talking about this point? It's right there at that section of the story. It's kind of like what Blaine always used to do with his stories, where he says, when you're asking questions about the beginning of the story, you need to stand where you were at the beginning, because there's always 3 places. So your first place, you ask questions about that place, you're standing in that place. So that helps those slower processors with visual cues. It goes, oh, he's talking about the house, because that's where he started, right there in that spot. and it really helps. All those little things that we do as teachers, and Darcy, you said all the little decisions we have to make live at the moment. We're making thousands and thousands of micro decisions at every moment to move the class forward or stay where we are, because kids need more practice. They need to park right there and stay there for a while to be able to get that comprehension going.
So this is you've hit on one of the problems that we're having as a district right now, is that the district has gone whole hog, and I'm talking to other people around the country kind of similarly. District has gone whole hog into this idea of professional learning teams. I don't know if you guys have heard of this or anything. So the idea is, I'm one of 4 Spanish teachers. Thank goodness I'm the only French teacher, the only Japanese teacher. I'm beholden to no one. I can do whatever the heck I want. But I'm one of 4 Spanish teachers, and we have to march lockstep. We all have to work out of a textbook, and we all have to. So there's this idea of, you're going to give a common formative assessment on the same day. And I'm like, wait a minute. If you're doing something deliberately, it's no longer a formative assessment.
Yeah.
Okay. But ignoring that the idea, like, I've got 2 Spanish 1 classes. My 2 Spanish 1 classes are not at the same point. Class dynamics are very different. So if my 2 Spanish 1 classes can't be at the same point, how can they be at the same point of my other colleagues' Spanish 1 classes? It makes no logical sense to make us like, you all have to do the same thing at the same time.
Oh, that is one of my pet peeves. That's not really a professional learning team. That's a different type of thing that at least the way we define it. But it's been a thing that they said that we have to be on the same page at the same time, because if the kids ever move from one class to another, I'm like, and how often does that happen?
Right.
How often does it happen?
And
it happens, and it normally happens at the beginning of the year when they're trying to figure it out. It doesn't happen in the middle of the year. So my thing is always, I like to say, we should have, like, where should the kids be at the end of our teaching period? So for me, it's a semester.
Exactly.
For you, it's a year. That's what we need to get to. It doesn't matter how we get there, teaching method. It doesn't matter how fast we get there, because let's say if we're all going to meet at a conference in Florida, some of you can drive because you're close. Some of you don't like to fly, so you take a train or a bus. Some of you have to fly because it's too far. It doesn't matter how we got there. The destination is the same. So I'm right there with you there, number one. Number two, because even my classes where I try to keep lockstep aren't in lockstep. But I do believe in common assessments, but I don't believe in common assessments that are skill specific. I like proficiency assessments, because a proficiency assessment isn't assessing that you've got through unit 2, section 4. It's that, have they got these general concepts that they need by this time of the year? And so those ones I like. Our school's working on common assessments. My previous school, we were way beyond this. This school's really backwards. They're taking them a long time to get to the same place that I have been. My school district has been for like 10 years. But they are like looking at, can they do the adjective agreement? That's what they want to make a common assessment on. If they can match no. Let's make an assessment that they can understand the vocabulary we've been working with, because they're like, well, your listenings are way too long, because my listenings are like this and their listenings are like this. And I'm like, but my kids can do it. And they don't think when they go to yours, they think it's way too simple. They're not really feeling challenged at all. And it's just because they don't use that much language in the class. And I'm one of the few who aren't a native speaker, and I'm not knocking native speakers at all. But because they're it's the textbook that I'm knocking here, because they're so ingrained in the textbook, and the textbook does not teach in the second language. It teaches in English and has sprinkles of language in there, that you're right. If you only use the textbook, your kids are not going to be able to understand more language, even though I know you as a native speaker could speak the entire class in the language without a problem.
Right. And the textbook is disconnected. It's here's a sentence, here's a sentence, here's a sentence. They're not connected together. Yeah.
I know kids can memorize all the vocabulary and all the grammar rules, but they've never come together, so the kids don't know how to apply the grammar rules with.
It's the application.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's teaching about language, not language itself. That's my big difference with a textbook. So I have to use a textbook, but I don't teach the textbook. We never open it. In fact, it's sitting on my whiteboard and a little chalk seal just so that it knows. So if an administrator comes in, they know that it's there. And I teach the content of it. I'm sorry, what?
I have occasionally had a student switch classes at the semester, but I've also had, like this year, I have a student who's been sick the entire first semester and just enrolled in school right now. Okay? So all these students are the same to me. I'm a good enough teacher, I hope, that, all right, you don't know your ER verb endings. I can catch you up in 5 minutes. Okay? It's not that difficult. You don't know this thing. Okay, that we'll work on that. I'll get you caught up on that. So to me, it's not a real issue that students switch at the semester, or a new student moves to town, or whatever. Like, we are professionals. I've got students in my class that I've been teaching for a year and a half, and they don't know all the things that I think they should know, And I've got students I've been teaching for a year and a half, and they're at a third year level, So it's differentiation, and that's just part of good teaching. So anyway, that's
it goes back to being comprehended. It doesn't matter if the kid was absent or not, or if the kid just enrolled, or if they're brand new and they came from a textbook class. It doesn't matter. If you are making yourself comprehended, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. Because that's the whole goal. Because the only thing the kid cares about, and the only thing that I care about, is that they understand what I'm saying. Because I could teach the subjunctive on day 1 in Spanish. Because all the kids care about is, what the heck did you say and what does it mean? They don't need to know all the different uses for subjunctive and when it comes up in Spanish and how to form it. They'll pick that up through the comprehension process. Their brain will figure it out. It's much smarter than I could ever be. So they're going to figure all that stuff out. All you have to do is make it comprehended by the students. And so my kids, the favorite activity my kids like to do, they think they're getting me off track. They'll ask me about my prom, or they'll ask me about my driving experiences. And I'll tell them in Spanish. And it's the best time because, number one, they're all paying attention. I don't have to worry because they all want to know about my first date or whatever that is. I'm telling them in the target language. They look at the agenda and say, we didn't get to anything that was on there in the whole 90 minutes, that we didn't touch a single thing on there. And I'm like, that was the best class I've had in weeks. And so they think they got me because they got me off task. But my goal really is, no matter what's on my agenda, what my administrator wants, what the textbook wants, my goal is to speak the target language as much as possible and make sure it's comprehended by the kids. That's my only 2 goals. And so that was a knock out of the park for me.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And if we, and they learn so much because I can't speak when I talk about that without using past tense and present tense and subjunctive. All those things come into play naturally. Can you imagine if we taught our children, I'm sorry, it's your first year of life. I can only speak to you in present tense. Oh, here. You just turned 1. Guess what? This is the past tense year. We don't do present tense anymore. It's all about the past tense. And then, you just hit 2. It's your 3rd year. Guess what? The rest of the grammar all comes rushing at you at once.
Yeah.
But that's how textbooks are. Like, I had a kid in Spanish 2 goes, what happened to the present tense? We never use it anymore. Because the whole Spanish 2 textbook is all past tense because they teach it so segmented and you can't separate it out. You can't teach. Like I said, focus on verbs because everything else comes into play. Prepositions, adjectives, agreement, word order, all comes into play when you focus on verbs. And when you focus on verbs, I'm speaking in present, I'm speaking in future, I'm speaking in past, as naturally, and the brain will figure it all out. It's really good at doing that. And so
Well, I also feel like the verbs are a little harder to understand. They're abstract, right? And so once you have the verbs, hey, the noun, I'm holding a pencil right now. So
Yeah.
obviously I'm talking about a pencil. Or, the nouns are easier to figure out. They're concrete. The adjectives, that's the description for the noun. So when you talk about being comprehended, like once you've got the verbs, pretty much everything else in the sentence you can figure out by context.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure it out right now, wait a couple of sentences and then it'll all click, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I agree totally with verbs.
yeah, because observers tell me, they go, I've never saw, how do you know that they know how to say boy and girl and man and woman and book? I'm like, because when we do writing or they're talking, they're using them. Well, how did you teach them? I go, I didn't. We wrote a story the other day about a girl. This time it was about a book. It comes up naturally. But the verbs are what I really need to, because when kids are looking for things to be able to say, what they usually get hung up on are verbs. They don't have enough verbs to be able to say. And so I use Dr. Terry Waltz's Super 7 along with Mike Peto's Sweet 16. So my goal is to teach the Sweet 16 in all of my classes. So he does his whole curriculum, levels 1 through AP, off the Sweet 16. They focus on those verbs, but in different tenses each year. And so that's kind of what I do as well. And those Sweet 16, they're not always the most frequent verbs, but they're the biggest verbs with a punch, meaning you can use them more. They're more versatile. So they go is in there, and you might not be able to say fly or walk or run or drive, but you can say go and it gets the same meaning across. And you might not be able to say needs, but you can say wants, which is close enough. So by knowing these Sweet 16 verbs, forwards and backwards, then you can really express a good 90% of what you want, albeit at a more simple level. But who cares? When you're working in another language, if you can make yourself understood, that's the whole point. And by making yourself understood, you're actually acquiring more language as the communication comes back at you. So you are growing with that.
Yep. Those circumlocution skills are so crucial.
Absolutely. It's a skill you need to teach. Absolutely. I have circumlocution posters on my wall. So I have, person, place, animal, idea, or thing. And so they'll go, and the Spanish words are up there along with pictures, so they know. They'll go, es un animal que dice oink. There's an animal that says oink. And so then I go, oh, es un cerdo, perfecto. And then we learn a new word together in there. Yep. So I do that. I had one kid goes, es un perro que dice meow. Because he didn't know cat. So he said, it's a dog that says meow. We understood. It was either a dog who really spoke a foreign language, which is a good story, or it was a cat. And so you can have some fun. And I had one kid that I want to end with. This is a funny little story. And this is why I love when kids make mistakes, because it makes for funny stories. I always write, every semester I have new stories because all my stories are based off the kids in my class. So this is last year, Spanish 2. I work at a career and tech academy. So one of the careers is culinary. So this kid was in the culinary program. So I was asking, I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? He goes, I want to be a chef. And I go, well, what kind of restaurant? Do you want a fast food restaurant, an elegant restaurant, a casual restaurant? He goes, I want an elegant restaurant. And what do you want to serve? What kind of food? And he was looking for the word steak, but he didn't know the word for steak. But he knew the word for cow. So he said, vaca, cow. And I interpreted, I knew what he meant. So I knew he wanted a steak restaurant. So I taught him the word for steak and we went on from there. But in my mind, I'm like, this is a funny story. So I wrote a story about this kid who opened up a restaurant that was elegant. And instead of him serving steak, he served cows as the clients.
Oh, he served the cows.
The cows. So he had grass pizza, wheatgrass juice,
This is very Gary Larson. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a really funny story because he made this circumlocution faux pas kind of like thing, and it became a
Uh-huh.
really, really funny story the kids really, really like. And what I like
I
about this
love
is
it.
at the end of the year, I will print out all the stories of each kid and hand it to them at the end of the year, so they have the
Aw.
stories that they go, that were about them
That's
throughout the year,
great.
so they have like a little memory sake of that. And with AI, and I know not everybody's with AI, but I use it as a classroom assistant. And one of the things I do for these stories is I'll upload a picture of the kid without their name or anything on there. And you can do it in a cognito mode now in ChatGPT. You can do it incognito so it doesn't save any of the information. And I upload their picture and I'll say, okay, I need him to be a chef at a cow restaurant. And it makes a little funny picture that goes with it. And the picture looks like my kid. It's a cartoon version of the kid. And so the kids really like those too when I do those kinds of funny little pictures. And it makes it just a little more personal. And it really gets them
Yeah.
to pay attention and have fun.
Yeah.
So do we have any? We're a little bit over. That's okay. Does anybody have any final thoughts that they would like to add before we close out for today?
Don't give up. Keep on keeping on. I'd say the only time you're in trouble is when your kids are talking in English.
Yeah.
So hush them. That's the only time. If they're sitting there silently looking like a deer in headlights, keep going because you're going to circle back to it. They're probably processing. If they're not processing, they'll be processing soon enough. So just stay the course.
Absolutely. What about you, Darcy?
Yeah. What she said, and also just continue having conversations with colleagues like we're doing right now. You come away with ideas. You come away feeling that what you're doing is validated. Just continue talking about these things and talking about your questions and your insecurities with people who know what you do and who do what you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also have conversations with those who don't do it exactly the way you do. Because I think there's value in everything that all of us do, and that we can learn little techniques from everybody. So they can learn from us just as much as we can learn from them as well. I think it's really important. So with that, I want to go ahead and say thank you to our guests. I really appreciate Darcy and Pamela joining today, live TV. So let's be honest. Have you ever looked out and saw your class and thought, wow, I am speaking fluent language to a room full of mashed potatoes? That was us today. So let's go ahead and I'm completely lost my train of thought again. Live TV. I've had a couple of weeks off here. So thank you so much for joining us today on Comprehend This. My huge thanks to Darcy and Pamela for diving into the awkward reality of teaching to blank stares and reminding us that comprehension doesn't always look pretty or obvious or reassuring in the moment. And if today's episode helped you breathe a little easier the next time your students look emotionally unavailable, but linguistically very much present, then we've done our job. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a fellow language teacher who's currently mid-lesson thinking, is this working? And remember, you can watch us live on YouTube or catch the replay on your favorite podcast app. Ditch the drills, trust the process, and I'll see you next time on Comprehend This. Have a good one, everybody.